War does not always end when the weapons fall silent. Sometimes it seems to echo forward in time, carried not by documents or monuments, but by human memory itself. This story begins decades after a war officially ended, in a place that had tried very hard to forget it, in a small rural region divided by old borders and old resentments. A child was born into a family that had lost relatives during the conflict. The war was rarely spoken about inside the home. The grandparents avoided it. The parents believed silence was safer than memory. But the child, from a very early age, spoke as if the war had never truly ended. Before he could read, before he could write, before he could understand politics or history, he spoke of uniforms, weapons, and marches. At first, his parents assumed it was imagination. Children often invent games of soldiers and heroes. But this was different. The child did not speak with excitement. He spoke with grief. At the age of 3, he began waking from sleep in panic, crying and clutching his chest. When asked what was wrong, he used words no one had taught him. He spoke of explosions, of gunfire, of being surrounded by men who spoke a different language than his family. Most disturbing of all, he said this calmly, not like a dream, but like a memory. As he grew older, his statements became more precise. He described being a young soldier sent far from home. He knew the weight of the uniform, the smell of damp earth in trenches, the sound of artillery before dawn. He spoke of comrades whose names did not exist in his family or village. And then came the detail that froze his parents into silence. He said he had fought for the enemy. The family belonged to one side of the old conflict. Their village had suffered under occupation. The idea that their son claimed to have been a soldier fighting against them was not just strange. It was unthinkable. When questioned gently, the child did not show confusion or hesitation. He said he remembered dying in battle. Shot while retreating, he described the terrain. He described a hill, a broken stone wall, and a narrow forest path. These descriptions match no local landmarks, but they did match historical maps. As the child approached the age of 5, something else became impossible to ignore. He showed intense fear toward the national flag of his own country. Military parades made him visibly anxious. Loud marching sounds caused him to cover his ears and shake. Yet, when shown old photographs of soldiers from the opposing army, he reacted with familiarity, even sorrow. He pointed to insignia and named their ranks correctly. No one had taught him this. The parents, deeply unsettled, contacted a local historian, not because they believed in reincarnation, but because they needed reassurance that coincidence could explain everything. The historian listened carefully. Then he asked the child one question: "Where did you die?" The child described a location across the old border. in a region that had seen heavy fighting during the final months of the war. He described a skirmish that, according to official records, had resulted in the deaths of several young soldiers whose bodies were never recovered. One name stood out: a soldier who had died at the exact age the child claimed to have been, a soldier who had been shot during a retreat, a soldier whose remains were never found. The child knew his name. When asked how, he simply said, "That was me before, at this point." The family tried to stop the investigation. The emotional weight was too heavy. The idea that their child might carry the memories of someone who once fought against their own people was painful, even shameful in the eyes of the community. But the memories did not stop. At the age of 7, during a visit near the border, the child became visibly distressed and insisted on going in a specific direction. Against their better judgment, the adults followed. He led them to a small hill. There, he stopped. "This is where it ended," he said. According to later verification, that exact location matched the recorded coordinates of the soldier's final engagement. The child stood in silence for several minutes. Then he said something that no one present ever forgot. "I didn't want to fight anymore. I was tired." After that day, the memories slowly began to fade. The nightmares became less frequent. The emotional reactions softened. By adolescence, the child no longer spoke of the war spontaneously. When asked, he said the memories felt distant, like a dream that belonged to someone else. As an adult, he remembered remembering, but he no longer felt it. Skeptics argue coincidence, suggestion, or subconscious absorption of historical details. Psychologists suggest cryptomnesia, forgotten exposure resurfacing as imagined memory. But there remains one question without an answer. Why would a child raised in one side of a conflict emotionally identify with the enemy? Why would his fear, guilt, and sorrow align so precisely with a soldier whose story ended before he was born? This case remains one of the most disturbing aspects of reincarnation research, not the idea of rebirth itself, but the idea that war, trauma, and unfinished suffering may follow the soul across generations. Perhaps memory is not only stored in books. Perhaps history does not always stay in the past, and perhaps some children arrive carrying echoes of battles they never lived, but never truly forgot.